Hey guys, welcome to episode 4 of the Meta Meltdown. It's actually our first time being up on Twitch, so thank you for everyone who is stopping by. Today is Wednesday, June 8th, 2016. The Meta Meltdown is a weekly 20-minute podcast about the current meta in Hearthstone. Each week we'll focus on a specific deck. This week we're focusing on ZooLock, and we'll provide you on our insights on how to pilot the deck in order to succeed on the ladder. My name is Dominic Silverddragn Nguyen, Silverddragn with 2 Ds and no O. And of course I have here my lovely host, co-host, Nate Wolter, aka Natediggity. How's it going, buddy?
I'm lovely. Thanks for asking. How you doing?
Lovely. Yeah, doing really well, finally. We'll talk about that in our personal news, but let's just go through the breakdown for this week's episode. First, we'll talk about our personal news, like I just mentioned. We'll go into the meta report for Hearthstone. We actually have a new segment called the Vicious Syndicate Data Reaper Report. Kind of sounds dangerous, and Nate will be leading the charge on that. And then we'll talk about ZooLock. So yeah, should be exciting. So Nate, this week you had a little bit more time to play Hearthstone than I did. What kind of decks did you play?
This week I obviously played ZooLock, as it is the deck of the week, and then I was also experimenting a lot with Pirate Warrior. So
Cool.
Definitely smorking a lot. How about yourself?
I just played ZooLock. I didn't have too much time to play Hearthstone, unfortunately. I am just finishing up my finals. I finished actually today, so I'm really glad to be done. It was
Awesome.
a really hectic week. But yeah, so played ZooLock, and then I cosplayed as myself to like go to class and stuff. Unfortunately, I didn't have too much time. But it's all good. What else did you do this week, Nate?
Outside of Hearthstone, I guess it's somewhat inside of Hearthstone. I don't know where it lies, but worked on getting the stream set up and streaming live like we currently are, and just other stuff for the podcast. How about you?
Yeah, like I said, just finals, and today I had my car breakdown, which is super unfortunate because I was going to spend that entire time. I had like all of today scheduled to play Hearthstone, play ZooLock, and like bust out a bunch of wins. And thankfully I got a bunch of wins just before this podcast, but so we could talk about ZooLock. But yeah, unfortunately had a little bit more trouble to deal with. But it's all good. So, seeing as you played a little bit more than I did, again, let's talk about the current meta. How far did you actually get on the ladder, Nate?
I climbed from about rank 16 to 9, I want to say.
That's pretty good. That's a lot of stars, especially in a week. I know you're also a busy guy, so yeah, that's a ton.
Right. Yeah, not too bad. I definitely had some good success with ZooLock, so I was happy with the progress.
Sounds good.
What about you?
I climbed from I think 20 to 16, so I had some time to play. A lot of ZooLock, as we'll talk about, is really consistent, and it's really good at getting like a ton of wins in a row. So 20 to 16, 4 stars times 5, right? So that's like 20 games, but you get the 3 win streaks with extra stars, so that's super useful as well. But yeah, so let's talk about what you possibly would be starting to see, starting with Tier 1 of Tempo Storm's meta report.
Yes, sir. So, Tier 1, there were 4 decks that Tempo listed. Number 1 was Aggro Shaman. Number 2, Control Warrior, which is somewhat of a surprise. It definitely does well in the current meta. It just took a huge jump from where it was last week. Number 3, Tempo Warrior. Again, not really a surprise. I haven't really seen it all that often for myself, but apparently people are still doing really well with it. ZooLock, the deck of the week for us, at number 4. And then Tier 2, the number 5 deck is Midrange Shaman.
So I feel like you're right. Like Control Warrior is a little bit different. I feel like they have, seeing as the rest of the tier list is mostly aggro-ish, it looks like Control Warrior is really eking out wins by being able to stop decks such as those who are really aggressive. So I guess it kind of makes sense. I haven't seen too many Control Warriors. I've definitely just played against aggro, and then had just made less mistakes in order to climb on the ladder.
Yeah, it makes me sad that Control Warrior is at number 2 because I think a lot of people do view this meta report, and if they see that it looks like it's doing well on the meta report, they're going to start playing Control Warrior, and it's so annoying to play against.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Slow games where they just armor up and pass, or they'll get to turn 5 and you have a full board and they'll just brawl,
Yeah,
and your whole board's gone. So,
unfortunate.
fun times.
Yep, super happy fun times with the Control Warrior. Let's talk about the new segment, which is the Vicious Syndicate Data Reaper Report. It sounds really dark, dank, dangerous.
Sure does.
All these Ds, data.
Yeah, so this actually just came out today. It's their 4th report that they've done. So basically what they do is collect data from people who send it into them, and this week they got about 7,500 games logged, and then they just analyze the data. Yeah, it's a crazy amount. So it's basically like a pretty accurate meta report of what we've been seeing here of the overall games.
I see.
So the current deck for this week that was played the most is Zoo at 12%, and then Mid-Range Shaman at 11.1, or excuse me, Mid-Range Hunter at 11.8, and then Mid-Range Shaman at 11.1.
Okay.
So even though Warlock or ZooLock was played the most as a deck, Warrior, it only finished at about 14%, while Warrior finished just under 20%, and then Shaman was, we'll say, around 16, 17%, and then Warlock was the 3rd most played class. So
I see. All right. Well, that's not bad. I mean, it's definitely nice to see more diversity out there. I remember running into back in the day, only running into like hunters, only running into like a ZooLock. So yeah, it's nice to see there's different types of decks out there. I think the meta is in a good state right now, and you just kind of have to know your matchups. So speaking of matchups, let's go through the deck for this week.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so let's talk about RDU's #1 Legend ZooLock deck. We currently have it up on the screen if you're watching the podcast on Twitch or YouTube. To our left, it's got 2 Forbidden Rituals, 2 Power Overwhelmings, 1 Soulfire, 2 Abusive Sergeants, 1 Argent Squire, 2 Flame Imps, 2 Possessed Villagers, 2 Voidwalkers, 2 Dark Peddlers, 2 Direwolf Alpha, 2 Knife Jugglers, 2 Darkshire Councilmen, 2 Imp King Boss, 1 Dark Iron Dwarf, 2 Defender of Argus, 1 Gormok the Impaler, 1 Leroy Jenkins, and 1 Sea Giant.
Very aggressive list, I would say.
I agree. Yeah, it's got a lot of charge, which I really really enjoy. I don't actually have Gormok, but I like the way I like the card. I've played it before inside of like arena and stuff. It's super useful. It does really well in terms of making you win more. So I actually really like that card. And yeah, Leroy doesn't have the charge with the Doom Guards, but sometimes Doom Guards are kind of clunky in your hand. So yeah, I actually really like the list. It's obviously really good, reaching #1 in Legend. And
yeah, I'd say that's a safe bet.
So yeah, no worries. So yeah. Let's talk about how to play this deck for those of you who have no idea or just want a better idea of how to play this deck.
Oh yeah, so the overview. It's a very quick-paced deck that you continually can fill the board with, and then you can use your hero power to replenish the board if they keep wiping out your creatures. Typically, you're looking to make value trades as best as possible, and then you can secure the board and just swarm your opponent, and then just repeatedly punch him in the face till he dies.
Done.
Sounds pretty fun.
Yeah.
And then, there's one more thing I wanted to add here is then you just try to play the around board control as much as possible. So don't just strictly go face. Like I said, make value trades. Otherwise, if your opponent lightning storms or Holy Novas or something, just wipes out your board, and they still have creatures on the board, it's pretty much game over.
Yeah, we definitely. I think playing this deck, you really have to know when. Like early on, you really want to make sure you control, try to get those value trades like you mentioned, try to 2-for-1, 3-for-1 even with your own cards, and then afterwards, after you're starting to run out of steam, you have to know when to switch, try to go for face, make sure that your opponent is the one that's spending his cards to clear yours. And yeah, and then you do very well with the deck with that general overview. Let's talk about win ratios. So this time around, I didn't actually get to play very much. I did go 3-1. The one loss was to a Control Priest, which got really, really good cards. just before we started the Men and Meltdown podcast. But everything else was pretty simple. I just played on curve. The deck runs really, really well. It's pretty easy. It highlights cards you should play because you play on curve. And yeah, that's pretty much it. What about you, Nate?
Yeah, I did pretty well with it. Not as well as I'd like to. I went 16-9 overall at 64% win rate. I was 3-0 against Paladin, 3-0 against Mage, 1-0 against Druid, 3-1 against Warlock, 3-2 against Hunter, 2-2 against Shaman, and then 1-2 against Priest, and then 0-2 against Warrior, and I did not play any Rogues.
All right.
So not bad. 64% is pretty good, but I was, from 16-9, so I didn't have the fiercest competition.
Yeah. True.
Still pretty happy with it.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you're climbing, I'm pretty happy with the deck, I think. So, yep. Let's talk about matchups. So, ZooLock is really, really good against the current Tempo Mage, Shamans, Aggressive and Midrange, Miracle Rogue, and Ramp Druids. What is it bad against, Nate?
Well, typically you cry if you face anything that's warrior-based, except for Pirate Warrior. So basically Patron Warrior, Control Warrior, Temple Warrior, you almost auto-concede. It's usually not good, just the amount of board clear and AoE that they have. Freeze Mage is typically a bad matchup, especially with this archetype that RDU ran. So say, for example, they drop a Doomsayer. It's pretty hard to clear in this deck if they drop it on turn 2, whereas if you were running a Crazed Alchemist, you could clear it right away. We'll get to that discussion in a little bit later here.
Pretty smart.
And then Priest is also a bad matchup. I think that was your loss that you said you had.
Unfortunate, yeah, the Priests.
Yeah, they just have so much board clear, and I think enough people get pissed off playing aggro, so they just play Priest and then just play constant board clears. I know that's what I did last month.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a bad matchup as well.
Definitely, no worries. I think there was one season that Dragon Priest was super popular, and I played that up to like 1, which is crazy. But yeah. So it definitely does very well against aggro decks such as ZooLock. So let's talk about more the cards that kind of stand out in this deck. I really, really like Forbidden Ritual, for one. Forbidden Ritual helps you play on curve. It synergizes super well with Darkshire Councilman. I actually got lethal thanks to Nate helping me see it. It was exact lethal with, I think we played Darkshire the turn before, and then I summoned six tentacles and then I hit Power Overwhelming. That's backwards. Power Overwhelming, 6 tentacles, 11 damage to the face, exact lethal. It was a fun time. It was
glorious.
Yeah, it was great. But yeah, so there's Forbidden Ritual. I think it's a super useful card. It helps you play on curve, like I said. And what else do you want to talk about, Nate?
I really love Possessed Villager. It's such a versatile card in here. It works really well with Knife Juggler. If you run it into something, the new minion that it spawns will activate Knife Juggler. It'll activate for Darkshire Councilman. If you run it into another minion with Power Overwhelming, it'll come back as a 1/1. So excellent card. Then I also like Darkshire Councilman. You sort of just explain why it's so powerful.
Yeah.
It goes really well with Forbidden Ritual, and then it can just kind of spiral out of control if it's not dealt with. Yeah. And it has a big butt, 5 health. So I
know. I constantly find if I'm playing like you're gonna lose anyways. You're playing into warrior decks, but they throw executes and they throw bashes. They throw everything to try to get rid of the Darkshire Councilman. I think most decks get really scared of seeing that, even though it only has 1 health, because they know exactly how quickly it can really get out of hand. So yeah, Darkshire Councilman is definitely a huge MVP in this deck.
Yeah, it's scary if it's not dealt with, that's for sure.
Yep, sounds good. Let's go into honorable mentions for this deck. I mentioned earlier that there's no Doom Guards. I actually really like Doom Guards, but they do come in pairs often, and they clunk up your hand. So I think with Gormok and Leroy being in the deck, you might not do as much damage as often, but I think that it's actually a really good substitute. I feel like you don't have as much of a backlash if you draw 2 Doom Guards. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, it's definitely used for more of a control type zoo, as weird as that sounds. So you can have a 5/7 on the board. It's pretty good in mirror matchups against other zoo.
Right.
The only downside is obviously discarding 2 cards. So I'd say it's a horse apiece depending on the matchup that you get. It's a good card though. A card that you typically don't see, except for more aggressive types of zoo, are the Argent Horse Riders. I think those are good if you are running like a double Soulfire, Argent Horse Rider, and just going face. Not all that common. And then the other one that I really like is Crazy Alchemist, which we sort of talked about.
Yeah, definitely.
I actually did tech in one when I was messing around with this deck, and it worked really well, obviously, against Doomsayer, just killing it immediately by swapping its health to 0. Also works well against all the shamans that you see, and you can swap their totems and kill them. So
that's pretty smart actually. I think
and also you can use it to swap your own minions just to have more favorable clears. So
yeah, that's actually really smart. I might have to play around with the Crazy Alchemist. I think that's excellent. And we listed one more card, Brand Bronzebeard. I think I'm not too big a fan of it, seeing as there's a little bit more drawbacks than I feel than I would like. For instance, Flame Imps, or if you're running the Doom Guards, even Leroy is giving them 4 Whelps. But I think that it is it's definitely a card that can net you a lot of value. Talking about like Dark Peddlers, talking about Dark Iron Dwarfs, Defender of Arguses. So it kind of just depends on the deck you want to build. What are your thoughts on Brand Bronzebeard?
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, it does have some downside as Leroy and Flame Imp. I've learned Flame Imp the hard way.
Oh yeah,
6 damage to my own face. But I think overall it's a good tech sometimes. It's a decent body for 3 mana, 2/4. Abusive Sergeant works well, and Dark Peddler as well, where you can draw, a Soulfire and a Power Overwhelming off of, 1 card hypothetically. So I think it's pretty good, but didn't obviously make the cut for our #1 legend friend RDU, so I will stick with his deck for now.
Yeah, no, his deck is really optimized for play. So yeah, definitely. Let's talk about starting hands. So Nate, what are we looking for? Normally I'd ask you against aggro or control, but I feel like for Zoo, and I think you'll agree that they're both kind of the same. So we're looking at the same couple of cards.
Yep, you're just looking for a fast start either way. So you're going to be looking for 1-drops, obviously, at Abusive Sergeant, Argent Squire, Flame Imps, and then 2-drops are good. So Dark Peddler, I forgot Voidwalker as a 1-drop. And then Knife Juggler at 2, Direwolf Alpha at 2. And then if you do have coin in your hands and you already can curve out pretty well at 1 and 2, you could also play or keep Imp Gang Boss and Darkchild Councilman.
Yep.
So any of those cards are really good. Anything above 3 mana I wouldn't suggest keeping, obviously, because you want to have a fast start, you want to fill the board, and then you cannot, if you obviously run out of cards, you can use your hero power, and then you can just keep replenishing. So anything that's quick.
Exactly. Anything that's quick. I think it's also a mistake. Sometimes people make this mistake of getting a really good curve 1, 2, 3, 4, and you have the coin. So I think it's actually better to maybe risk throwing back the 4 because you're gonna draw something. This deck curves out so well. You almost kind of want to have 2 1-drops and kind of shoot for that. And even if that doesn't work out, you have a bunch of 2-drops in this deck too. So it's very rare for you to draw, Sea Giant Leroy, Gormok, Defender of Argus for that. So if that does happen, you're getting all your bad luck out, play the next game, you'll probably do really well with this deck. It's fairly simple. But yeah, so is there anything else you want to mention, Nate, before we wrap up?
I think that about does it. Everyone give it a try. It's super, super powerful right now. Go do it before everyone starts countering it if they haven't already. And then enjoy ranking up quickly.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you guys so very much for watching and downloading our podcast. We'd like to give a quick shout out to our moderator, Ritual Plays, for getting rid of all that spam in our chat. There's so much of it. But yeah, you can find this deck list and any of our previous shows at metameltdown.com. Next week we'll talk about
Mid-range hunter.
Mid-range hunter, yes. The bane of Nate's existence. He actually really hates this deck, but it's all good because we have to kind of play all decks kind of fairly, right?
Yes, sir.
So yeah, no worries. Next week we'll try to be on at Wednesday. Should be no real problem. This week, thanks to the horror of finals, I wasn't able to get on. So thank you guys for coming out to watch us this Thursday. But yeah, we'll try to get on at 7 p.m. every Wednesday. If you want to find us, you can find us at metameltdown.com. That's our website. At the Meta Meltdown is our Twitter. Meta Meltdown is our YouTube. And metameltdownpodcast@gmail.com is our email. If you have any questions, comments, concerns. Oh, hi, it's Anxiety Gamers. Just, by the way, shout out to them for stopping by in our Twitch chat. They're really cool. But yeah, tune in next week. And any last words, Nate?
7 p.m. Pacific time.
Pacific time, that's true. We do have a couple people who are out in Utah watching us, and I always seem to forget that they're in a different time zone. But no worries, guys. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.